this is Laura Fulford, welcoming you to this Bite-Sized Bio web seminar. Today's discussion is entitled Breaking Out of the Mold, a panel discussion of alternative careers. And today's panelists include Dr. Wendy Ochoa, who is the Marketing Communication Manager at Mobile Laboratories and also the founder of III Design Studios, Tom McFadden, who's an 8th grade biology teacher at Nueva School and also a science rapper, and Hamer Dodds, who is a freelance artist and artist in residence at the Centre for Regenerative Medicine in Edinburgh. In this discussion, we will first hear from all our panelists individually to learn a little bit about their careers that they have now and how they got there. We will also then move on to a more general discussion about alternative careers for scientists with all three panelists. As this is a panel discussion, we are more than welcome for questions from the audience. So please type any questions that you have into the questions box which appear on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll put them to the panel at the end during the general discussion. So let's get things started with our first panelist. Dr. Wendy Ochoa.
Thank you, Laura, for the opportunity to do this. I'm excited about this.
That's wonderful. Obviously, you have two positions. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. What sort of science background do you have?
Oh, okay. So I have a PhD in biochemistry at the University of Barcelona, and I have done science research. So I have been in the lab working in science research for more than 12 years. Until a couple of years ago when I moved to a more marketing position at the Mobile Laboratories, obviously a science-related company, but doing more marketing. So I'm not wearing the lab coat anymore and doing that, I'm pipeting. But I did that for like many, many years. At the same time, it was about 7 years ago that I went back to school to do graphic design. And from that, I started a freelance company, III Studio, III Design Studio, and I did on the side as a freelance many graphic design and different projects, video, a lot of different things. So now I'm kind of combining both, doing marketing and design for a company and running on my own, some projects, design projects.
As you've mentioned, you've got two positions, your position as the Marketing Communication Manager at Mobile and also your position with your own company, III Design Studios. So let's first of all talk about your position of your own company. Tell us about this. What does this involve day to day?
You can imagine my job at Mobile already takes a lot of my time. It's a full-time job and I'm fully dedicated to this. So right now for my freelance work, I work for clients that I had before, for friends, family, and things that come my way. So I'm not promoting the freelance job that much, but I'm actually have pretty steady work for people that I have worked already or new people that know what I have done before. So it involves almost everything. I mean, I build websites for people, I do flyers, I have layout, books and magazines, and so pretty much anything that you think about when you think about graphic design. A lot of computer design, that's promotional material, and from stickers to posters to anything you can think about.
So we've got some images here that you have created from this company. Can you tell us a bit about this image?
So this actually was created during my postdoc at UCSD, University of California. So the reason for this image is just to give you an idea of like how even when I was doing research, I was doing both X-ray crystallography and cryo-electron microscopy, and they are both techniques that they need quite a visual component to actually display the data. So already there, I think that was like, the first time I realized that, I might actually want to do some visual. And I was doing it already with the science part, with the research part. So it's just created with computer software that it actually takes the data from the electron microscope and converts it into a 3D image. But it was just the idea of giving you like, okay, the science is not all just the data, and the art is not only the visual. So we combine both every day.
So this is something that you created before you got into the graphic design?
Correct, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So do you think this is where that kind of passion for the graphic design came from?
I don't think it's like the passion comes one day and it's like, oh my God, today I'm gonna, just from now, I'm gonna do art. But I was a person that was doing photography from, when I was little. Well, I was drawing and I was doing things. And I think when I started working with computers, with computers because of the science part. I realized how much art I could do with computers. And then is when I realized that, that's maybe a really way to go and a passion. I was wanting to create the art but using the computers.
So we've got another image here as well, which is obviously some of the stuff that you've created in your freelance business. So obviously this isn't science-based work,
No.
but do you find that having a science background has helped you with any of this? Do you think it's given you any particular skills?
I mean, obviously the software, I was using software before I started doing graphic design. So it was probably easier for me to learn the software that I need to use for the design. But also, this whole adventure of Flawless, it was more like a marketing adventure. And for that, absolutely, I think science, the analytical mind that I think we use while doing science, helps you analyzing things. And in this adventure, it was, we had to find out where the customer was, how many numbers, how many, even the money part. And I think we learned to do all these things in the lab too. I think there are skills that we learn every day in the lab.
One of the other things that I'd like to know about this is actually, do you ever find that your science career in terms of your graphic design, in terms of the customers and how they perceive you, do you think that it hampers you or hinders you in terms of customers' views? Do they think that because you have a science background that you are less creative, or do you not find that problem?
Oh, no, I don't think at all, but it's a very good question. Actually, it's the other way around. I think you say, I'm a scientist or I do science, and they already think you are very smart. That's good. That always helps, right? So no, I don't think anybody gets any feeling about that. But I remember the first time I tried to get a job, an actual full-time job as a designer, and the company had nothing to do with science. So I went there. I saw my portfolio. I saw my resume. Like, well, you have a PhD in biochemistry. Like, why do you want to do design? They almost didn't believe that I really wanted that job. So actually, I think it didn't help me. And they thought I was probably going to ask for more money, or I was going to not do it serious. I don't know. And so at that point, I was actually thinking, should I not say anything about the science background? But later on, at Movayo was the other way around. When I interviewed for Movayo was looking for somebody that had the science background. So in that case, it helped me,
That brings us nicely into talking about Movayo and your current position there. Obviously, you are a marketing communication manager. That is a phrase that a lot of people might not fully understand what it means. So can you tell us a bit what it means to be a marketing communication manager and what you do day to day in that role?
Well, actually, I would know that, but it is like a very broad title. And I think it means different things depending on where you work at. So if you work at a huge company, a big company, you might be doing things more specific. But Movayo is not a big company. It's a wonderful company, but it's a small biotech company. So we end up doing, all of us, the marketing team, ends up doing a lot of different things. For me, marketing communication manager, my job, everyday job, is to design and produce the marketing material, the print, the online. I coordinate the advertising, so I talk to third parties, advertisers, like, for example, Bite Size Bio. Bite Size Bio would be a perfect example for us. It's a company that we use to tell people about our company. I do internal support, like things that people need inside the company, and external, like protocols and flyers and everything related to the product. And at the same time, I'm in charge in some customer support, distributor support. I go to trade shows. So we do a lot of things. And so I can do the science, I can do the design part when I'm totally in touch with the science part. That's what I love about this position.
So obviously this brings together two things that you're quite passionate about. So it's quite good in that way. If someone who's a scientist currently wants to go into something like this, what kind of other skills would they need, or are there any things that they should be looking into doing to build up their CV in order to go for a job like this? For a job like this, it would be, it's a little different if you want to do more design, or if you want to do more communications. So if your goal is to become the designer or to do more with the visual part of it, you have to, the person has to master the design part. They have to master the software they use, and they have to master the skills.
So you have to build a portfolio. So when you go to the job interview, you can say like, I have done all this, and I can do this all for you, and I can do it well. If it's more like a communication type of position, then it would be writing. And it can be also a social media position. So this person can be a social media guru and have still all the science. So that would be actually the perfect combination, right? Like with the science background to understand the product, understand the clients, at the same time, a social media or designer or writer guru to actually be able to move that science content and put it in the right place or the right format.
So how crucial is it in this position that you have a good science background in terms of knowledge
I
and
think
the experience in the lab?
I think for this position, for this company, is key. It's key because I work together with the R&D department and the services department and the customer. So I think it's key for me to understand the science. But again, if it was like maybe a bigger company, like a much bigger company, maybe I don't need it that much because they would give me everything that I have to design and they would give me the concept, and maybe you don't need to understand science that much. But if you are going to be in a place where you need to understand the science to actually communicate that message, it is actually very important. It's essential to have the science.
And do you find actually it gives you confidence with this job, the fact that you understand the science behind it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, and mostly when I'm talking to customers, I mean, I go to a trade show and sometimes they see the title marketing communication manager. They kind of don't trust what you are telling as much as until they see, oh, you have the PhD too, so what do you do? And then it's like, I think scientists, we are like that. Sometimes we think that nobody else is going to understand what we do until you talk to somebody that does similar things that you do. And I think that gives the customer like a trust feeling, and for me too. I think it makes me feel comfortable about talking about science with them and learning from them too.
Here's a slightly more general, bigger question. What was it that made you want to leave lab work and go into these positions?
That's a good question. I think for me was the passion for doing the visual part, but also I think once you spend so much time in the lab, and I think in some way you lose the big picture of things. You become so specialized. So you become the person that knows more about that particular protein. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, great if you really love that protein and this is all you care about. But I think I had my mind tends to go a little more whole picture thing, and I wanted to see what was going on outside. And I think that was one of the main things why maybe I was not that type of researcher that wants to get it deep into a question. So I wanted to see more of like the general question.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. That was
Sure.
really enlightening. In terms of time, I think we best move on to the next panelist, though. But thank you very much for those responses.
Oh, thank you.
So our next panelist is Tom McFadden. Tom is an 8th grade biology teacher at the Nueva School in California, and he's also a science rapper. Here are some stills from Tom's various rap videos that he's got on YouTube, and here is also the link that you can get to his YouTube page. I highly recommend people go and check out his rap videos. I was hoping to be able to show you a part of one today, but unfortunately the resolution wasn't coming across very good. But with that, we'll get started. So Tom, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what background do you have in terms of science?
So I studied human biology, which was an interdisciplinary major as an undergrad at Stanford, and that I was really focused on neuroscience and integrating a few other social science disciplines with that. And then I taught there for 2 years fresh after graduating. I had done an undergrad thesis on cichlid fish neuroscience that was really cool, but I was given this opportunity to basically teach introductory classes to the sophomores, and it was a really cool opportunity as basically a full-time staff teaching position. And that's when I started making some of the rap videos. That photo in the upper right-hand screen was kind of the first music video that we made. I made it for my students. It was the first one that really reached a broader audience. It was about gene regulation. and got picked up by a New York Times blogger. So it was just kind of this really terrifying experience of going viral and having all these strange people, email you and comment and this and that. So that was the first year of teaching, and then that inspired me to kind of continue to try to excel as an educator, but also to try to keep on making products that could be bigger than just my individual classroom and reach a broader audience in terms of improving science literacy, science engagement. I was mulling over the PhD for a solid 6 or 7 years, really felt like I needed to go down that route in order to, kind of like what Wendy was saying, to gain that legitimacy in the eyes of other scientists, which is not a good reason to go get a PhD if that's your only reason. I wound up in New Zealand on a Fulbright scholarship studying science communication. So I was able to go to Otago, the university down there, for 2 years, and I did some actually education research about using music in the science classroom. Went on a couple tours, had some very crazy adventures in New Zealand where I kind of honed my live science rapping game and made a lot more songs. And then since coming back, I started working in America again with public schools, and you see 3 video screenshots down there. That's a bunch of 5th graders from San Jose. We're rapping about Pluto and kind of having a debate. We've got a battle between Black Plague and Yellow Fever. And then my favorite, and it sounds like it's your favorite too, is the Rosalind Franklin battling against Watson and Crick, kind of for who deserves credit for discovering the structure of DNA. And my model there was I was really excited about trying to get kids to be creators of really ambitious, high-quality educational products so that those kids could have this amazing interdisciplinary learning experience, but then that the products they created could be used by other students in other classrooms and other adults too. I can't tell you how many people come up and say, I had no idea who Rosalind Franklin was until I saw that video, and now I'm pissed off about it. Then somehow, while I was kind of touring around at all those schools, this school that I currently teach at found me, and just kind of fortuitously, the 8th grade biology teacher was, sorry, I don't know if you guys know 8th grade, but they're basically 13, 14-year-olds, intermediate school maybe, and I needed like an actual job rather than just like fundraising on my own and relying on grants. And the content that we were teaching here ends up being pretty similar to what I was doing with the sophomores at Stanford. Somehow have been doing both for the last 2 years.
One thing that has really struck me about what you've said during that, how you've come to the position you're in now, is it seems that a lot of it just kind of fell into place, and that you just went after what you enjoyed, and that from that you were able to find, a path. Do you think that would be right?
That's absolutely true, and it's been just really amazing. I feel so lucky, and don't take it for granted, but at every single stage of that process that I just described, I had no clue what the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year plan was. All I knew is that particular year I was doing exactly what I wanted to be doing, and that I was in a situation where I was doing stuff that I enjoyed and following my passion and skilling up along the way. But there's no end goal in any of this. It's just kind of, in each situation, finding the right people who happen to be around you at that time and making some cool stuff happen.
That's wonderful. And I think that's really interesting, actually, because as someone that's gone down the science path and left it myself, and meeting with a lot of science people, I think that not having a 5-year plan is something that scares a lot of people in science. This idea that they don't, not knowing where they're going to be is a scary thing, because obviously in science there is, in general, a very defined career path. You mentioned during that you had mulled over for quite a while about doing a PhD. Ultimately, what made you decide not to?
Part of it was, to tell you the truth, what I was most intellectually interested in was cellular and molecular neuroscience, and I just hated killing the animals. And so I tried my hardest to find some more human-based stuff that's more overlapping with psychology and fMRI and all that. If you don't have hands-on experience in that field, it doesn't really make sense to go for a PhD in it. And I kind of refused to go down the animal, not for ethical reasons, just because that's not how I wanted to spend my days. And in the meantime, I was just doing all this other stuff that felt a little bit more right to me, and felt like, wow, every day I'm really enjoying this. Whereas when I was doing my thesis as an undergrad, I cannot say that I felt the same way. I'm glad I did it. I liked doing the science. It was a fascinating research question, but it just didn't feel like it was the best use of my talents, and it certainly wasn't the most enjoyable use of my talents.
Here's quite a delicate question. So a lot of people see, or in science, there's this very defined view of the ivory tower, that people in science view themselves as being better or doing the best that they can, and that people who decide not to go down the academic, in terms of, obviously you're doing academic, but in terms of the research side of things, that they're somehow failed or aren't as successful. What's your opinion on that with what you've done?
Yeah, great questions. Basically, the way I've gotten around it, I don't care at all about what people think of me and whether I'm successful or not, but what I do care about is that they appreciate the product and that it's something that scientists feel okay with, because there's so much science communication, which is really what I'm doing, so much science communication out there that isn't very good, and that scientists, they don't feel like it is well representative of the actual science. So the way I've dealt with that is just by collaborating with scientists pretty much at every single step of the way. And it's so much more fun to me to be able to be a generalist and to delve deeply into all these different subjects for a little while, and then make sure that it gets the green light and the okay from an expert who says, like, okay, well, you can't cover every little minute detail, but this does it justice, or this is for the general public, this is about right. So I'm kind of answering a different question, but that's how I've navigated the issue of not being a practicing scientist and still producing scientific related work.
And how do you find then from that scientists are towards you? Do you find that they're very accepting, and do they value what you're doing in terms of these rap videos and the science communication that you do in general?
Yeah, I would say so. Mostly, I mean, I'm lucky, and this would be true of anybody who has their PhD or has been in the science game for a long time, but you have a million connections in a given field, and it's not hard to find people that I personally have some sort of relationship with. And for the people who are strangers, for example, regulating genes, that song in the upper right-hand corner about Hox genes. Like when all these Hox researchers saw that somebody made a music video about Hox genes and that it wasn't totally inaccurate, they were overjoyed. You know what I mean? Like, I think scientists in general want the general public and popular culture to pay more attention. For the most part, people are really excited, and especially if you're going to respect where that scientist is coming from. And then the other thing is that like I said, I have quite a large network of people that I just know at this point, and who I know are supportive, and I know are excited. And to tell you the truth, I'm working on a show right now where I am interviewing scientists about things related to the new American science curriculum that's just come out. I don't know if this is a generational shift or if people have always been interested in outreach, but I find that current PhD students are so excited and hungry to interact with the general public and distill down their research and feel like what they're doing is exciting and relevant. So I feel a lot of support from the scientific community.
Great. I just want to touch again on that video that we mentioned previously, the Rosalind Franklin versus Watson and Crick video. Again, the link to the YouTube video is there for anyone that wants to see it. I'd highly recommend it. It's absolutely fantastic and tells a really interesting story that actually I think a lot of people in the general population don't know. And I'll fully admit myself, I only learned a few years ago. This was obviously something that you did with kids in your classroom. Do you think that having them do this sort of rap video really engages them a lot more in the curriculum and learning, and that they actually retain this information a lot better than just making notes or drawing diagrams?
It's a question I field a lot. I think that is true, but it is not the main goal of these projects for me. I'm really interested in getting students to have creative confidence in general, and to have positive associations with science, and to feel like they can do a complex creative task with a team and create a high quality product for an audience and divide up tasks appropriately. So there's like a million different things that go into creating a video like this. And those intangible things, feeling like you're good at something, feeling like, I'm not necessarily killing it in science class right now, but like I can freestyle better than anybody else, like do a rap. There's a lot of these intangible things that I think are way more important, frankly, than the content. But content-wise, like these kids would not care where the phosphates are in DNA necessarily, but like where those phosphates are is the crux of a narrative that really is emotionally powerful, right? Like people get really upset about Rosalind Franklin, and that's a really, I think we all know this, that narratives are a great way to hook people into something. So it certainly applies here. But I guess for me, it's really, people have been using songs to help learn content for a long time. And I think that that's a cool thing, but I have much bigger goals for these type of projects than teaching or memorizing the content.
And how are these videos being accepted by a wider audience? Do you get much feedback on them from YouTube viewers or blog post viewers? And what kind of feedback is it that you get from people?
Yeah, I get a lot of relatively positive feedback from the general public. Kind of like what I was saying earlier, the people who get most excited about it are people who know the story of Rosalind Franklin and feel like, oh, thank goodness, like someone's doing this, or people who really care about science education, like, wow, this is a great way to teach kids stuff. And then people who hadn't heard of Rosalind Franklin who say, wow, I'm so glad I know about this now. There's a big difference between this round of songs and the previous round of songs I made, which were for a university biology class. Those videos are not accessible to the general public. You know, you start throwing around names of transcription factors and Hox genes and this and that. And people can be, so there's a guy, Robert Krolwich, from Radiolab. He did a blog post about one of the songs about citric acid cycle, and he's like, yeah, it's entertaining and I like the music, but it leaves me giddy yet mystified. So that really stuck with me, because I agree, like when you throw a bunch of jargon into something and then rap, it can be exciting and interesting, but you're not going to learn anything from it if you're not studying it on the side. And so I've been trying to move in a direction towards less jargon, bigger picture, more narrative that allows the general public to kind of get access. I don't think I've quite made it there yet, to tell you the truth. Even like you watch a Pluto video, there's still a lot of content packed into that Pluto video that's not that easy to follow for someone who doesn't know that history.
I guess one of the big questions about all of this stuff that you're doing is, what advice would you have for someone that wanted to do science communication in this way? Like, how did you do your first rap video? Is it something that you just woke up one day and said, hey, I'm going to make a rap video about science?
I mean, yeah, and this is a obnoxious Nike cliche, but like just doing it is huge. And then doing it and doing it and doing it some more. So the first one I made was horrible. I mean, it's on YouTube. You can go see it. It was about evolution and rims, reproductive isolating mechanisms, but also there's a lot of American rap songs about rims on cars. So it was all based around this rim pun, which I still like, but like the audio quality was horrible. It was just, you know, it was the starting point. And I got still some positive feedback for it, but I did it the next one and the next one and the next one. And I was only doing it because I loved it, right? Because it was so much fun, because it was a combination of my interests. So my advice to people is like, everyone has these passions. You know, you heard Wendy talking about art and the visuals. She was able to combine that passion with the data analytics. And for me, like, this just happens to be my passion. So it's hard to imagine advising somebody who doesn't, you know, have a background in music or love music to go make science songs. You should go make a science, whatever it is, right? Like, but when you can combine things together, it's just intellectually fun, it's artistically and creatively fun, and you end up hopefully in a little niche corner of the universe where there's not a ton of people out there. I mean, there's more and more each day, but there's not a ton of people making science rap music videos with kids. And so it just makes it easier to live without the 5-year plan for me, because, you know, there's a lot of competition in science. There's not a ton of competition in the science rap music video game. So yeah, the more you can combine those different interests, the more you can really excel in the thing that you love and not have to worry about competing for grant money, if you know what I mean.
In the terms of time, we best move on a bit, but I just have one last question for you. Making these videos, you need to have a lot of skills in terms of music knowledge, but also all the technical skills in terms of the software and stuff. Is that stuff that you had before you started doing these videos, or is it something that you've picked up along the way and have basically taught yourself?
I already had some basic background when I was making the first ones, but I've picked up everything as I went, and most importantly, collaborated with people, because, you know, at this point there's just no way I couldn't to this moment do a video of the quality that you're seeing there by myself. So I got a lot of help from people who believe in the cause and want to support. But there was a point, I made one called Fossil Rock Anthem where I had to teach myself Adobe Illustrator and After Effects and make some motion graphics. That has proved to be so handy. Because I was so excited about this thing, I taught myself the software, and now I use that software every day for little things. So combination of, yes, teaching yourself stuff, and also collaborating with talented people.
So not knowing something shouldn't be a hindrance to you just going out and doing it.
There's never been a better time to teach yourself how to do stuff with the internet.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was a really interesting discussion.
Thank you.
So now we're on to our final panelists, which is Hamer Dodds. Hi, Hamer.
Hello there.
Hamer is a freelance artist and also artist in residence at the Centre for Regenerative Medicine in Edinburgh. I think out of the three panelists that we have today, I think this is the more abstract one for people who come from a science background. So can you tell us first of all what science background you have?
Yes, I started off doing biochemistry at London University, and I ended up doing an MSc there and footled about a bit. Went to PE college, did some PE, taught some football, cricket, then went on to do some research at Penarth Research Station, did a bit of teaching, and eventually ended up doing a Master of Fine Art at the University of Edinburgh, and I've taken it from there, really.
Going from science to a Master of Fine Arts is quite a leap. Did you have much of an artistic background before you decided to do that?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Again, it's moving from the objective to subjective. I can't really comment on my work. I've always been interested in the way that certainly bioscience was taught was by observation. And I think that observation in art and observation in biology, they're pretty much the same thing. I think on the slides you can see the first one, at the top of the screen, that's the first drawing I ever did, which was a non-scientific drawing. Yes, that's the one. And I just did it, really. And I think what Tom said is quite right. Just go out there and do it if you enjoy it. And people seem to quite like it. And,
so is this one that you did before you did your Masters of Fine Art?
No, I'd never actually drawn before I was doing my Master of Fine Art in that sense. I'd done scientific drawing, I'd done painting and drawing of other forms, but that's the first pen and ink drawing I ever did in my life. And I did that as part of the course, and I had to exhibit it, which was a bit, what shall we say, interesting, in the middle of the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, but it seemed to be okay, so I was quite happy about that.
So you're someone that's taken quite a leap in terms of changing careers there.
Yes, I think it's a leap in change of careers. I don't think my subject matter particularly is different. I think I'm using the same skills sets that I used in science, of observing, and I'm just, I think, communicating through a visual image rather than a spoken image. I think that's, or a written image, I guess. Yeah, I think it's, I would say it's the same side of the coin, art and science, and I think you probably know that from what I've said before.
Yeah. So this interesting what you just said there about the analytical side. So do you think very much that observational and analytical skills that you gained during your time doing research in the lab has really helped you with your art and gives it another dimension?
Oh, undoubtedly. You're looking at things, and you're looking all the time. When you look at biological things, there is an inbuilt aesthetic, I would say, and you're used to the way things sit together. And when you come to construct something, and you look at the imagery was just done by people like Haeckel and the people who illustrated for books from the 19th century, you get a feel for the way of putting things on paper. And so I think the actual visual culture of science is in some ways different, but in many ways the same as the visual culture in art. It's about generating an aesthetic in this sense. I think that's the case. Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be interested to know, what's a typical day? I mean, maybe there isn't a typical day in your life, but
no,
what do you do during your day?
Well, I can say today I went into the Centre for Regenerative Medicine. We had a meeting about some projects that we're doing with the guys and the communication team who are involved in that, and we talked about things, and they said they didn't know anything about art, and I said everyone's an artist, and quoted Boys about it, and we had a discussion about that, and it was so interesting about whether what the image was portraying was a good image, was a bad image. Just a totally fascinating day, looking at people's perspectives and coming away with something to do. So that would be a day that I've done, or it could be giving a talk to people on art and science. It could be just sitting down and drawing for the whole day.
So we've got some images that you've created.
Yes.
I'd love it if you could just talk to us a little bit about them.
The one on the left with the tree, that's in the Belize, in the rainforest in Belize with the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. And I put those two together because you can see that I saw that, I photographed it, and that imagery was used and has been used in the drawings I constructed. And on the right was a piece of sculpture I did for the Centre for Regenerative Medicine, which is a graphic sculpture about 4 meters by 3 meters, again, using images from the workplace I was in and trying to reconstruct a stem cell and use the space to get everybody who's involved in the science at the Centre for Regenerative Medicine represented within the visual gaze, as it were. Sorry, that was me on the side, so if you want to go on to the next one, I can say. Yeah, okay, this one is one of the pieces of work I did with Edinburgh University was on looking at soil, and I had a thing called the soil memoirs, and the idea was that soil retained the memory traces of whatever happened there. And flood and field is a very important battle, as we, in Scottish culture, for many reasons. The flowers of the forest were cut down there, and those were growing there. Those plants were growing there. So I collected those, and I identified them using my scientific knowledge, and allowed me to go to the Botanic Gardens on the right, and they let me use their collection. So I identified the specific species that I was drawing to construct a narrative of what was going on. I also collected soil there and many things like that. So we had it was scientific, but it was art, but it wasn't either. It was expressing ideas about the nature of where I was, of time and place, as we had a symposium on time and place.
As you just mentioned, you used your scientific knowledge in order to identify these species. So do you find that you use your science background quite heavily in terms of things like identifying species or coming up with ideas?
Oh yes, I mean I think all of them have a genesis in science, and I think the good thing about having done science to a really reasonable level, I guess, is that A, I can talk to scientists, and B, I know pretty well where to go to get the hard information I need from the experts, who are all too willing to talk about their work, because oddly enough, that's what scientists like doing, talking about what they do.
How do you find the scientists are when they interact with you and you as an artist? Do you think that they see you as being on a different level from them because you're an artist, or does your science background help bridge that gap?
I think the science bridges that gap. I think it does a lot. I can pretty much follow what they're saying, and they do go into the jargon. I agree with Tom completely on that, and de-jargonizing is a good thing. But it's not done on purpose, and I can not. Yes, I can follow what's said, and I think there's some sort of implicit trust that I'm not just piggybacking on their visual imagery. I'm actually interested in what they're saying. I think they use me as a sounding board sometimes, and I think it's light relief to talk about. Well, I was talking about my Dolly the sheep today, and I wanted to do something about the flock of clones, and I just think it's just looking at something. They find it that maybe they haven't looked at before because they haven't been given the time or the space. Maybe that's naive or arrogant to me, I don't know, but that's why I feel.
Do you think that you help scientists at all in terms of the way they view things and the way their mind processes ideas?
I'd love to think that. I think that I have the time and the space to identify areas that perhaps they haven't looked at. When I can ask very simplistic questions like, you've just taken 600 pictures of this stem cell experiment that you've done, and one to publish. Why would that be? And I think that's not always, and there's some reason for it, but it's never been made concrete. It's never been written down. Or there's one person at the Centre for Regenerative Medicine now who's started, I gave him some pens, and he started drawing. Now he's the leader of a group, and he's very busy, but we're going to probably look at the way he's drawing and what he's trying to put into the drawing. This is not going to be a short process, but I think it's a useful thing to do. So I hope it's useful. If nothing else, it's it's something different in life. I can walk in there and have a 10-minute talk, and I think it maybe is useful.
What do you view your role as in terms of science communication with the public and also with scientists? Do you feel that you're someone that tries to make science more accessible to people and less scary?
Yes, I think it is. I was up at Cromarty the other week, and again we were I made some stencils of Dolly the sheep. There's various reasons for that. But children they could draw this sheep and they could draw flocks of this sheep. And while they were drawing, and it wasn't just children, people, because they were intent on the drawing and they were engaging with that, they would start talking about other aspects of science, or I'm not saying it's just science communication, but other aspects of their life, of what things mean to them, the ethical issues involved, because the process, I think, of drawing is quite therapeutic. I think it wouldn't be used in medicine as a therapy if it wasn't. I think there is an element to it which is relaxing, and it allows people to be on the same level. Communal thing as well, quite often.
Quite a good way to get people thinking and talking and maybe excited as well about science.
Yes, and realising that they're actually doing something. And I must say I'm privileged to be at the Centre for Regenerative Medicine, because this is cutting-edge science when it's all said and done. I'm talking on one hand with people who are at the top end of things, and then the next time I'll be talking to someone who doesn't know about it. I'm not saying that I do, but they maybe give them a little spur to try and engage more. Maybe it just enriches their world. I hope so. It maybe sounds too much that, but hopefully, with a bit of luck.
I've got some more images here.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to discuss these at all.
Oh, well, that's one of my heroes, Haeckel, on the left, and that's his Tree of Life. I've got this project going on with a phylogenist, because phylogeny is something I really care about. And on the right, I've recast the same Tree of Life. I've sort of nicked his image, but to the left of it is the way that phylogeneticists use the same idea of as a tree in linking systems, and I quite like the juxtaposition of it, and I like the idea of linkage. And it's quite interesting that I've done a larger drawing of that, and one was used by one of the vice principals of the University of Edinburgh talking about networks, and another one was used in a talk about materials, i.e. fabric, in Shetland College, because it seemed to be applicable to both worlds, to talking about the science and talking about making fabrics in Shetland, which is quite interesting in its own right.
Oh, that's quite interesting how your work can be interpreted in different ways. This is my
Right.
personal favourite image that I just wanted to talk across, and I think this is just because I have a background in cell biology, but I find this image absolutely fascinating, and I can just stare at it for a very long time, and the more I look, the more pops out at me. And I'm
It's
just
very
wondering,
kind.
how do you imagine these being seen by different people? So obviously, for someone with a heavy science background, they're going to see the mitochondria in there.
Yes.
They're going to see the nucleus and the Golgi body. But how is this meant to be for people who don't have such a heavy science background?
Well, I hope there's an aesthetic, and I hope it's something that interests people. One of the things I've learned, and I learned very quite quickly in art, is as soon as you've drawn something, you lose the ability to say what it's about. So you just have to lose that. And you've got to take what people see in it and say, well, that's interesting. That's what you see, and other people see something different. One thing I'd like to say about this, it's an unfinished work. I've only done a few drawings, really. This is one of 23, and they all interlink, because you can see they go off the page, can't you? Well, there's another 23, as I say, that stretch out to the left and the right. It's called Unity Principle, which is to do with the way that in a way, bioscience is studied, I think, because if we didn't believe that all things had a common origin, then there wouldn't be any unity and blah. So, and I can switch scales. So the next one I think is I think it maybe goes to Greenland, because I did some work in Greenland, and I tried to fix it in, saying everything is. They say, oh, that's a different one, that. Okay, that's again trying to say the same thing. This is me doing some work on soils. I took soils, and that's me on the left doing my experimentation. I've used this recipe I found from Australia for putting colours into soils, and those are the soils in the Roslin Institute on the right, which I've made, and I've cut them up, and then I took them to Germany, which was a bit risque with the general idea about blood and earth and the fascist movement, which was a bit hairy about when I did it, but I showed a nice flower opening next to it, a video of it, so I didn't push it too much and called it something other than blood and earth. But there you have it. Right, sorry about that, but that was a bit risky in Cologne.
No, that's fantastic. I think that what you're doing is really wonderful, and it's certainly opened my eyes into terms of the fact that there is no such thing as a defined career for someone who is in science, and that you can go off and do it. And I think something that's come across with all of these talks today, all of the panelists, is that it's very much about just finding what it is that you love and going for it.
Oh yes, I think pardon me for cutting across. There's two things. I mean, both Wendy and Tom said, and it was the big picture. But my gleanings from the talks that went before is that by specialising and becoming narrowed down, sometimes the wonder of the privilege of studying science is lost, and you can recapture that ground by being a generalist, and art allows you to be a generalist, I think.
Yeah, I think that's something interesting again that's come across the three talks, that one of the motivating factors was not being specialist, getting to do lots of things, and not just being focused on that one individual protein or individual project that you're doing. Do you ever have any worries or regrets or doubts about the path that you followed?
One of the things is that being freelance, one of the things that I think defines science, and people will argue with this, is that it's a very cooperative thing. I mean, I know people in groups, but they have a very tight groups, and there's a camaraderie there. If you're doing your arts by yourself, you tend to be a little bit isolated. And so again, it's nice to be able to move into areas like Royal Botanic Gardens or the Centre for Regenerative Medicine, which have people who are interested and give you more ideas. That's, I suppose, the only regret I have, is that you lose. That's the little bit you lose, and you have to work hard to maintain that, I think.
The other thing that's really struck me from your talk, actually, is the fact that you didn't really have any artistic training before you decided to go and do your fine arts.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit, as ever, a little bit controversial again and say, well, yes, I did, because my artistic training, I think, came from the fact that the way I was taught biology is we looked down a microscope and we had to observe and we had to draw accurately. So I think the motor skills of being able to draw came from my science classes. To be able to describe something. And I think that the art gives you a freedom to not to be nailed down to the way that people think things should be represented. So yes and no.
But formal in the terms of defined artistic, but that's you've raised another interesting point in the fact that actually, whereas a lot of people see art and science almost at being polar opposites, that you very much feel that one gave you the skills that you needed in order to follow the other.
Undoubtedly. Going back to 1979, and when Joseph Beuys made the simple realization that artists do not have a monopoly on the creative. Well, yeah. I mean, that's clear. We're all human beings, we're all creative, and we can do these things, and we shouldn't be limited by other people who say we can't. That's what I think. Gosh, that sounds profound, but it isn't. Yeah.
No, that sounds absolutely wonderful. So I was hoping next to have a discussion with the panelists, a more general discussion about moving out of science and doing something a little bit alternative. But I think, unfortunately, in terms of time, we're just not going to be able to do that. What I'll hopefully do is get those responses from the panelists and put this online along with this webinar, which will go up within the next day. So if you want to go back and look at this, you're more than able to. It'll be available on our website. Yep, so if you go to our website, bitesizebio.com/webinars, you'll be able to see all of our webinars that we've had and all of our upcoming ones, and you'll also be able to view this webinar again. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our three panelists, Tom, Wendy and Hamer. I think that's given a lot of insight into the fact that there isn't a rigid career path in science, and there's lots of different things that you can do, and it's all about going out there and following and finding what it is that makes you tick and what it is that you want to do, and you can combine art and science, and the two actually go together very well. So I'd also like to thank you, for the audience, for taking the time to attend and listen. As I mentioned, if you've enjoyed this and would like to view the video, it will be available on our website, and it should be up in the next 24 hours, and also you can see our upcoming and previous webinars there as well. So it just leaves me to say, until next time, good luck in your research and your careers, and goodbye from all of us at Bite Size Bio.